Hey guys, it's me, an INFP. I'm getting in my video for the month, and today I want to talk about NFs and depression. I don't know how much you guys know about depression in general, or how it correlates to MBTI types, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about it tonight. And hopefully you'll be enlightened on some things. So, INFPs are the most likely type to experience depression in college, and the most likely type to experience suicidal thoughts in college. And I actually think both of those go in general as well. Outside of college, INFPs are among the most likely type to experience depression and suicidal thoughts, unfortunately. So I don't know how many of you who are watching this experience problems with that, but yeah, it's a problem, and I know a lot of people who struggle with it, including myself. And among all the NFs, INFP and INFJ are probably struggle more with depression because the introverted function and the feeling functions are more prone to depression, and introverts have a more pessimistic view of the world, which is why they may be they struggle with that. And introverts hold a more pessimistic view of the world compared to extroverts who have a more optimistic view of the world. So I think extroverted NFs will suffer less with depression compared to INFs, but some of them still do. I'm not sure which suffers more from depression, ENFPs or ENFJs, but I know ENFPs do struggle with it, but they just hide it from people unless they feel close enough to tell them about it, because they don't want people to know. People who suffer from depression may also suffer from anxiety as well. Sometimes they come in a duo. If you have one, you might have the other, which in my case I do struggle with both depression and general anxiety, which is very common in INFPs. And I've been struggling with depression since 2014, I think. And the previous year, a lot of things had happened. Deaths, big changes, stuff that kind of shattered my world, I guess. So yeah, I started noticing depression cycles in 2014, and it has continued to slowly escalate as years go by, so that's 3 years now. And I did go briefly to a therapist, maybe a couple visits, and even though I only went a couple times, that was actually very helpful for me. And if you do struggle with depression, you may be going to a therapist, or you might consider that as something that would help you, especially cognitive therapy, which challenges your negative thought patterns and alters your behavior by making you think about the views you really have and how accurate they actually are, because not all of your thoughts are always true. And that was my first experience with cognitive therapy, and even though I was only there for a short while, I was able to realize, some of my negative thoughts were untrue, and I was able to build on that, and I think that still helps me today. So I think, well, here's a question for you. The question that comes to mind is why INFPs struggle with depression so much. And I don't have the full answer to that, but some of the things I've noticed is that INFPs are very idealistic, and once something happens to disillusion our own idea of reality, we struggle to find a coping mechanism, and it's often not a healthy one, because we tend to internalize our unhappiness, and we're usually very hard on ourselves. And when stuff doesn't get out, like extroverts might find it easier to talk to someone about it or get it out in a healthier way. But with our dominant FI, we tend to bury it inside of ourselves and let it fester, and when it does come out, it's not expressed in a very coping manner. And I think that maybe our introverted feeling leads to us not being able to, get out of ourselves to help with our depression. And if you happen to get into an FI and SI cycle, which is when it's just your dominant feeling, and let's say your memories of what went wrong with your life or negative things in the past, and you'll just keep recycling those in your mind over and over, and you just can't get past it, and you kind of get stuck. And that is not depression, but that might happen when you're depressed, or it could lead to being depressed if you get stuck in that. It just tends to go down to a negative spiral, and it's not a good feeling. What I've noticed about being depressed for a few years is once our world is disillusioned, we tend to be more cynical than we once were. And I know I am. I used to be really naive, and I I still am, but I also have a more cynical view of the world and certain things that have disappointed me or that I've, seen the truth of. And I know I've read online that depression is when you truly see the world for what it is. And I don't think that's completely true because there is good and bad in the world. But I think when INFPs experience depression or other NFs, our idealism is compromised and we tend to see all the bad that's happening. And it's hard for us to see the hope as well. So I think everyone might experience depression differently, but it is a very real thing. There's a difference between feeling depressed, like not wanting to get out of bed one day and feeling sad, to being clinically depressed, which is long-lasting and it affects your ability to cope with the real world. And kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah. I've noticed for myself that depression tends to go in a cycle, just like other things. And it just kind of has a mind of its own sometimes. So even if everything is going fine and nothing like bad happened, you will still feel yourself get depressed. And you can kind of like feel it coming, but you can't do anything to stop it, which is a hard thing to deal with. But I've just learned to kind of ride the wave and being self-aware of what's happening and knowing that you're starting to go into depressed mode and try to do things that will help you cope until you get out on the other side again. And sometimes if you have depression and anxiety, the cycles might intertwine, or they might go one after the other. Like for me, I'll be like fine for a couple of days, and I'll be, my happy self, feeling good, and then I'll just feel the depression coming on, and it's like a feeling you learn to recognize, and then I'll be depressed, or it could go further into suicidal thoughts for a few days, and then I might come out of that and go into anxiety for a few days and be anxious about everything, and that's a whole thing in itself. And then I might be fine for a few days, and then it will start again, or something like that. Depression might be related to the past or the future, and anxiety tends to be related to the future. So it might depend what you're thinking about, and overthinking is like the worst because we do that anyway. But if you're experiencing any of these things and you struggle with them, overthinking just really doesn't help. And I think it actually does help if you can get out of your head and do something active and creative to just, snap you out of that downward spiral. And it is hard because when you are depressed, like, you don't feel like doing the things that will make you feel better. But yeah, I think thoughts themselves can lead you to a negative place. So I think it's really underestimated how powerful your thoughts are, and how if you were able to be aware and change your thoughts, you could really help yourself become, you could improve yourself if you learn to improve and recognize your thought patterns. So yeah, with the NFs, INFPs tend to be the most depressed. Feelers tend to be more depressed than thinkers, because feelers experience more hurt, and with suicide ideation, we idealize that because it's an escape from pain, and feelers tend to feel emotional pain more acutely than thinkers would. So feelers get depressed easier, and I think perceivers might have a tendency towards depression more than judgers, just because perceivers are more in the moment, and I don't know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Yeah. So, I'm sorry if you are dealing with depression or anxiety or any other mental health problem, because it makes life a lot more harder than it already is. But I hope you improve and are able to find happiness in your life. So thanks. Bye.